Oh, my name's Rob and this is Cattle Rabbit Scale Model Studios, and in this video it's all about bases. These are undeniably intrinsic to our miniatures and they are a fantastic way of framing your miniature and also just elevating those paint jobs and really making something visually interesting. This video is going to be full of lots of tips and tricks. If you are new to Warhammer or maybe you want to level up your basing game, this is going to be the video for you. It's going to be filled with lots of little things that I do that just, to me, elevate a base from good to really, really great and just help frame those miniatures, as you can see like here. So stay tuned and let's just get started. So for this video, once again, I'm going to be rebasing my Zogrok Anvil Smasher. As you can see here, he was on a base before. I filed everything off and it's, you know, the base. That's exactly it, and this is what we're going to be kind of dealing with today. We're going to be going for this Outback, deserty, barren type of base. I really, really like this. I think it complements the iron jaws and yellow armor really, really well. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Also, loads of tips for you to kind of really push your basing forward. Now, as you can see, our guy here, he has got something on his foot. He has what I like to call a footprint. So with that, before we put anything on our base, what we need to do, and the first thing I always do, is I make sure, and you can see here, that my miniature is in the middle of the base. This to me will help frame it evenly. It won't look too wonky. Sometimes you can see that people kind of push the miniature too far back and it just, to me, looks a little bit odd. What you will need to do in this instance, if you want to, is mark out where his feet were. I normally put a few little dobs of paint here and there, just so I know where things are. Or you can just leave the base sitting, the miniature, sorry, sitting on the base as I'm doing here. That's not always possible, so you might just need to hold it with one hand. But the first thing you need to do, any little rocks, skulls, anything like that that you are going to put on your base, do it now. I've got this little pot of stones that I kind of dug up from the beach one day. It's done me a world of good, and I'm just going to pick out some of my favourites, like a little weird rock goblin, and I'm just going to place them on my base. Then I'm going to remove my model, so I know that they're not going to be in the way of anything. They're not going to hamper. I'm not going to stick too many and not be able to get his foot on, and that's one of the most important things. It allows us to have our model framed again in the middle. To stick them down, I'm just going to be using this cheap old super glue from my local discount store. As you can see, it cost me £1. It is the cheapest stuff going. A big dob, blast with a hairdryer, and that's it. Obviously, I'm only going to add a couple of rocks. You might want to add more, you might want to add less. It's entirely up to you. I do find that I tend to, when it comes to HQs and things like that, I make more of an effort as opposed to like just odd little trips. Then I am going to spray my base. For this, I'm going to use Hyax Brown, rapidly becoming one of my favourite sprays from the Colour Forge, as it's a nice neutral colour. Something like Xandri Dust or even Mephiston Red would work really well for what we're doing here today. So just make sure it's got a good coat. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using this old brush. It's a bit frayed, it's a little bit split. I've had it for ages. When brushes go like this, they become terrain-based brushes. And we are going to be using a couple of paints as well. Martian Iron Earth and Martian Iron Crust. And yes, I do know that they, you know, people don't always like the Citadel stuff. There's bigger quantities out there, but for the sake of this video, I know these products and I know how they work, so I'm going to be using them. Yes, there are probably better value ones out there, but you know, this is how I'm going to do it. Now, what's that one thing that you should do? And I'm going to show you here because I purposely haven't done it on this miniature. If we look at the rocks at the front, they look very blended in. But if you look at the one at the back, it just looks like it's stuck on the base. And that's one thing that I think visually straight away that I would look at when I see people's models and things like that. And it looks like stuff stuck on a base. It doesn't look like it should. What you got to remember with bases is it's a slice of that world with whatever your guy is doing at that time, almost like a little diorama. And again, it's so intrinsic to the model, framing it, bringing it all together and making it one piece. I think sometimes we really overlook that. So for the sake of that, I'm going to show you what I do here and how I make my stuff look a bit more almost natural, trying to replicate that natural Natural feel. Let's go with that. New word, add it to the dictionary. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with Martian Iron Earth. This is the one that is the crackle paint, so it will separate and spread and stuff like that. Don't worry about that. I'm not interested, but all I'm doing is I'm dabbing it on, little tapping motions, and I'm going to go all the way up to the rocks until we're left with something like this. Now, this is the first coat. I do find with these texture paints, I always double up. If you've got a cheap little hairdryer like I have, or just one that you can put on a low setting, a quick few blasts while spinning it, leave it for a couple of seconds to cool down. Same again, you can speed up the drying time a hell of a lot. Here you can see that it's still a little bit wet in the middle, but that's okay, we can work with that. This is what we're looking forward to. You know, if you're basing 10 things at one time, you want to be doing 10 bases at the same time. You can run a little knife or your finger just around the rim of the base. Good rim is good hygiene, and it's going to make life easier, you know, and a bit cleaner when you come to paint the rim later on. What I am going to also do is, same again, once this coat is dried, I'm going to come in with Martian Iron Earth again, and where I feel that maybe it's spread or separated in a way that I don't find, and it sounds really weird because we're trying to replicate nature, favourable, I'm just going to start dabbing again my brush over these bits just to kind of build it up, just so we can get a little bit of, it's going to be flat, but we want it to be a little bit more natural. I'm then going to come in with Martian Iron Crust, and this is the trick. I'm going to get a massive dollop, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just pushing it round those rocks. What this will do is the rock will blend into the iron crust, which then blends into the iron earth, and it feels like it's not just a rock sitting on a bit of earth, that it's actually buried in the earth. You know, time has kind of claimed it, it's piled up around it. It gives just a little bit of visual interest, not too much that it will take away from a paint job or, you know, overshadow the work you've done, but enough to just almost tell just a tiny little story. And that's something that I do try and replicate in a lot of my bases. Just keep dabbing your brush in as you go, you know, just working it so it piles up around it. Then I'm going to come in with Martian Iron Earth again, and all I'm going to do is effectively, I'm just going to dob it round the iron crust now, just so it really subtly blends the two together. And effectively all we're doing here is we're just doing a little bit of blending using texture paints that are exactly the same colour, but we're actually blending the texture, not the colour. Then you can just give it a little blast with the hairdryer. Same again, just keep spinning it, couple of little turns. After a couple of minutes, it will be dry. That's what we're left with, and that is perfect for what we want. Now, I say this a lot, little tips here. Bases, I've got loads of these knocking about. This is a little oval base. I'm going to use it as a little palette. Obviously, as a glasses wearer, sometimes I wear contact lenses. I've got one of these dropper bottles that I kept. I boiled some water, let it cool down, and I filled it up. And I use it just when I need a little bit of water for my paints or wet palette or anything like that. I'm going to put a couple of dobs on this little palette here, and then I'm going to get rat skin flesh. You could use something like Chicaro Orange if you wanted to, or if you want to go redder, then by all means do something like Wild Rider Red, or even Mephiston Red would work quite well. And I am then going to use a Shabty Bone. Now I'm going to show you here, and it's a little weird, I filmed all this and it has made the length of the video a little bit longer than what I would have liked, but that is literally all I'm adding in. So on the right here, I'm just adding in my Shabty Bone. It's worth noting, I haven't actually washed my brush out yet. So we're getting all those natural colours kind of blending in together. Same again with the rat skin flesh, as you can see here. That is all I am using. That's going in that one. And I need these two to be ready at the same time. And then what we're going to do is, using the rat skin flesh, or your orange wash, we'll just call it the orange wash for the sake of this video. I'm going to wash it over absolutely all the bits that had the iron crust. I'm going to wash it over all of the rocks, just so we start to kind of get that nice orangey, you know, when I think of like the Outback and stuff like that, you think of like the red rocks, the orangey, you know, and then down low you've got that lovely pale sand. That's what we're going for with this, you know, this look here. and I'm pretty happy with how it turns out actually. It's a lot of fun to do. It's time consuming, but it's definitely, it's going to elevate your miniatures, and it's just a great way of, you know, making something a bit unique. So as you can see here, you know, on screen, I'm dipping into my Shabty bone, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of like making little circles. I'm just being really random with how I have it, but as a rule, and you can see here as I go through multiple coats of this, as a rule, I always have the built up dirt around the rocks redder. So again, I'm giving it quick little blasts here and there, just making sure, and I keep coming in. I actually repeated this process 4 times to build it up, but then we are left with this. Because we've trapped the Shabty bone like a wash, and it's very watery, all the colours have blended together really seamlessly. What I am going to do next is I'm going to paint my rocks. I want like a really reddy browny rock, some Mornfang brown, and all I'm going to do straight from the pot, I'm just going to paint these little rocks. I'm not going to muck about or anything like that. I'm not going to be too perfect with it. You want to leave some of that Rhinox hide, high X brown shining through, fine. Then we're going to come in with some Reikland Flesh Shade. Now this is a really, really cool wash. Again, I like that orangey reddy look. Reikland Flesh Shade is perfect for this because it's got that lovely kind of reddish, you know, kind of look to it. And I'm going to wash over the rocks, and then I'm just going to pick out the patterns where it's, you know, my ground texture has naturally settled. If you wanted to, you could just kind of paint the whole thing. But what we're trying to do is we're just trying to give a little bit of definition, just to draw the eye to these little kind of clumps of like red area, just to make it a bit more believable. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to put my brush in some water, and I'm just going to feather out, like I'm doing here. So you get a really nice smooth transition from the pale sand to the red. And I'm obviously going to repeat that on the next one. Then I'm going to come in with just a couple of highlights. This I'm using Scrag Brown. I'm not being careful with this at all. I'm just going to highlight the tops, any natural edges, because I'm using actual stones, they're going to get their own natural shadows and stuff like that. So you don't have to go mental if you don't want to. Then what we're going to do, and this is a little trick that I do with my Dark Angels bases, check that out. I'll leave that a link below because it's a lot more pale sand. I'm going to just dob my dry brush into the Shabty bone. I'm not going to wipe it off with a tissue. I'm going to use the edge of the pot, as you can see here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start dabbing it, and I'm going to start highlighting those edges and bringing it inwards. So in actual fact, we're going from that lovely red to that pale Shabty bone to almost like neat Shabty bone that's dabbed on. And this is what's going to give us that kind of effect that we want. And as you can see, it's really starting to kind of take shape here. Some of these steps obviously can be skipped. I am going to add some tufts, as I do like to put some of the tufts next to like the rocks and stuff like that. And then for the rim, I'm going to use XV88, and then I'm going to attach the model. One thing I will do is I'm not going to blend, again, just so you can see what I mean here about what a difference it makes. I'm not going to blend his little thing that he's standing on in. I'm going to leave it. There he is. Obviously, I've painted the rim. Everything's nice and clean. It's completely framed the model really, really nicely, I feel. But as you can see, we've kind of got those rocks that are just sticking out. You know, it looks weird. It looks otherworldly. It looks fantasy. And then you've got him just standing on this plate. You would imagine like the weight of his foot would push it into the dirt slightly. Or if it was just sitting there, it would obviously have some like blending, it would have some like weathering on it, which obviously you can do if that's what you want to do. I do find getting a little bit of, I use this, it's Umbral weathering powder. This is rust, just dusting it around his feet or around some of the rocks. And obviously I will put it on the thing that he's standing on. And that's really it. You can do this with absolutely any texture paints. And one thing the Games Workshop Citadel stuff does really well is obviously you can wash over it. I think sometimes we just put like a simple wash over it, a cheeky dry brush, job done. This way what you're actually doing is you're bringing that slice of the world to life. Again, you'll see it here on my Morgrunter that I've recently completed. It really does bring a model to life, in my opinion, and it's a great way of kind of framing that model. So there we have it. Outback bases, a few tips. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully it pushes your basing game you know, just that little bit further, or giving you an idea on a way to base your miniatures. But look, that's it from me in this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it really does help me out, and I'll see you all next time. God bless and take care.